Multilingual radio station serving the diverse communities of Leicester on 102.5 FM. For advertising and sponsorship, email sales@eavafm.com or call 07811 659 364. That's 07811 659 364. Serving the community, 102.5 EAVA FM.
Hello everyone, how are you? We're back straight after the commercials, and as we mentioned, I'm going to bring on live. We are live on our socials, EAVA FM Facebook channel, and we are live on our YouTube channel. I am joined today by Okay, so yes, we are going live right now. I'm going to bring on the candidates. Here we go. Hashim, do you want to introduce the candidates for us?
Thank you very much. Our candidates today are really three candidates who are fighting for this post, and they are as follows. One of the reasons I'll use is their alphabetical order, and not so that I can be. The first, Rupert Matthews, he stands for this post for the Conservatives. Second is Dr. James Moore. He stands for this post for Lib Dem. And last not least, Ross Willmott. He stands for Labour. All of you, please welcome to our program.
Hi.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Good to see you.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. I like first and foremost what the community told me, and I have to stick with it. They said that the candidates need to be very focused on what they would do, not what others have done wrong. So that's the basic rule here today. So I will be interested more, and the community will be interested more, what you will be doing, and that is what the community want to hear. My first question, and I will be going as a surname alphabetical order, and will be with Mr. Matthews, and all of you. It's the same question. You need to introduce yourself to the community. Please talk about yourself and your background. Mr. Matthews first.
Okay, thank you. As a historian, so I write history books, I do magazines, I act as a consultant for TV companies and movie companies. So if they're making a film or something set 200 years ago, I make sure that the actors are wearing the right sort of costumes for 200 years ago, and they've got the right crockery on the table and so on. As regards the role of police and crime commissioners, you heard from Willie Back just now, there are several elements to that. First of all, there is representing the people and making sure that the police understand what the people's priorities are. And there's also holding the police to account to make sure that the chief constable is running the police force efficiently and effectively. Now, I've got experience of doing all of that. I was a councillor for 8 years. I was a member of the European Parliament as well. So I have great experience of representing the public when we're facing up against large state-run organisations, and you don't get much bigger or more state-run than the European Commission. So that's my background. I'm a historian. I've got experience of doing very similar jobs to what the Police and Crime Commissioner is doing, and I've written a manifesto, which is available on my website, which is rupertmatthews.org.uk. Everything I'm intending to do over the next 3 years or so, you can find in the manifesto. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is James Moore, Dr. James Moore.
Hi, I'm James Moore. I'm afraid I'm a historian as well. I work at the University of Leicester. I'm a fellow of the Royal Historical Society, but more importantly, I've spent around 20 years now working with young people in all sorts of capacities. The great thing about the University of Leicester is it's obviously a very diverse organisation. We take young people from a very wide range of social backgrounds, and I've got a lot of experience of dealing with all sorts of problems that young people have, and I'm very passionate about the question of youth provision and youth services, and we'll no doubt talk about that a bit more later on. I've been a borough councillor in Liberal Democrat-controlled Hinckley and Bosworth, and there we were really some pioneers of some really important crime prevention initiatives, including the nationally recognised CCTV scheme that we introduced in the town centre to reduce violence and criminality. And I'm also, very passionate about involving different communities across Leicester in the issue of crime prevention. I think that's incredibly important. That I don't think we've given enough attention either to crime prevention or to neighbourhood policing in recent years. There's been cuts to the police service, there's been too much centralisation, and I want to bring back real neighbourhood policing, real community policing. And I also want to ensure that there's restoration of proper youth services for young people so that we can guide people away from crime in the first place.
Thank you. Ross Willmott.
Hello, Hashim. Good to see you and good to be here. Yeah, my name's Ross Willmott. I'm at the moment a Labour councillor in the city and the Labour candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner. I am the only candidate from the city and the only candidate with any experience really of issues in the city of Leicester as well as in the county, because prior to being a city councillor, I was a county councillor for 12 years living in Ibstock. So I'm bring both a county and a city perspective. But having run the city council for 10 years, I am also the only candidate who's run a big organisation, one that's bigger than the police force. So I know how to get things done. And I know that many people in the community here in Leicester and Leicestershire know that, because I've got a track record of achievement, second to none really in the city. I created the city wardens, which work in all our neighbourhoods, looking after people, dealing with litter, dealing with antisocial behaviour. I created High Cross, Curve, built Braunstone Leisure Centre and replaced every single secondary school in the city during my time as leader of the council, as well as primary schools at Mellor and indeed at Taylor Road, which we had the pleasure of opening together with the then Member of Parliament, Peter Salisbury. So I am deeply rooted in the communities of the city and county. I understand the issues. I've worked with many, many community groups. I welcomed the Somali community when they first came to Leicester over 10 years ago. And I've stood shoulder to shoulder with the BME communities in the city when there's been crises such as 9/11. So I want to work on that platform, building community cohesion, building trust with the police, having more neighbourhood policing, and working on prevention and funding youth groups to make sure that young people are not drawn into crime. So my slogan, if you like, and my leaflets, manifestos here is about cutting crime, not cutting services. Thank you, Hashim.
Thank you very much. Now I'll do the other order. I'm starting with Ross. So I'll always, you will be in the middle, James Moore, if you don't mind. The second question, prevention is better than criminalizing the youth who grow in the inner city areas where facilities are very scarce. If elected as a next police and crime commissioner, what early prevention policies and strategies you will put in place to deal with this growing concern of the communities?
Okay, Hashim, I just want to add to that before we ask them. We're talking about youth here. I think I mentioned this before the adverts as well. Me coming from a youth worker background, coming from the inner city of Leicester, we're seeing a lot of violent crimes right now with young people. What have you, the new candidates, going to do to kind of help us tackle this issue and break down barriers with these young people? Because we're seeing a lot of these postcode wars. We're seeing a lot of young people get involved. We're seeing a lot of services being cut for young people. The opportunities are going for young people. And I know you guys will be dealing with the police prevention side. So how are you going to build a bridge with young people to stop crime happening? Hashim, who have we got first talking about this?
Ross. I'll go the other way now. Ross first.
Here we go,
Thank
Ross.
you very much. It is my highest priority, prevention. I think as a policy, prevention is essential. For every person that we can stop falling into crime or being drawn into crime, that's a person saved. It's a victim, not harmed. And it's a career for that person, and it's saving money at the same time. So every pound that we can invest in measures that prevent crime is a pound better spent. I was horrified to hear Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party announce that they were going to spend £2 billion on prisons. That seems to me entirely the wrong end of the scale to spend the investment. Now, if we had that money in the city, we could do so much more, or in our towns and cities, in terms of supporting youth groups and so on. But I pledge to use at least the £5 million, and some of that £5 million that is in the Police and Crime Commissioner's budget, to not only continue the work that Willie Barker's done, and he's done work in St Matthews, in New Parks, in Colville and in Loughborough, as he mentioned, as Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, but to extend that. I want us to rebuild our youth provision, to work with young people, to stop them carrying knives, to have the police out and build relationships of trust, but also working through community and voluntary groups in St Matthews, where obviously there was been recent knife crime incidents. There's been 3 murders of young men in Leicester in recent years, and that's 3 too many. We have to tackle knife crime. We have to tackle serious violent crime. We can only do that by working with young people to stop it happening in the first place. And that's why I've pledged to fund at least a further £1 million into youth work in our city and county. I've also had discussions with Peter Salisbury, the city mayor, about matching that £1 million pound for pound. And I want to have that discussion with every town, parish and borough council in the rest of the area to make that money go further. Because the Tory government has slashed youth services. There are none in the county at all. The same way the Tory government and Rupert Matthews, as a Tory party member, have slashed the police in Leicestershire and Leicester by 550.
Sorry, Ross, just to interrupt you. The £1 million would be for how many years? Just
that would be for all 3 years of the term that we had.
Term. Yeah. And you're asking Peter Salisbury to match that. So there will be £2 million of youth funds coming to the city if you are...
That's my plan.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm happy to finish there. I think it's really, really important to know that prevention is really the key.
Please make sure that you stick with your plans rather than talking what bad things the others have done. That was the recommendation of the community.
Okay. We're going to bring on James. Hi, James.
Well, hi, how are you? Well, on that theme, I mean, I think it is important to judge people not just by what they say, but by their record. And I mean, it's all very well Ross saying that he's going to do these things. And I think he is genuine in the sense that he wishes to. But Labour's overall record on youth services is terrible in the city. They've completely slashed the budget for youth services. I mean, what we've said as a national party is that we will make youth services a statutory service, so that we will make local councils have a responsibility to provide youth services, so they can't cut them, they can't wipe them out in the way that Labour have done in Leicester. So for me, youth service is absolutely essential. I mean, it depresses me really that, having grown up in this area and I've known this area since the 1980s, that many of the states and many of the communities that have had problems with crime and deprivation have had them for many years, 30 years, and nothing's really changed in many circumstances. There's been all sorts of initiatives, but nothing's changed. So I think we've really got to double down on those communities that are particularly suffering from high crime and deprivation. Think about what sort of strategies are needed by building in communities and voluntary organisations to solve problems, not go for a top-down approach with the assumption that the police commissioner knows all, but actually to get communities involved themselves in fighting crime. And where necessary, provide the money for that. And we are determined to actually try to restore youth services across the county, not just in Leicester, but across the county, if we get elected on May the 6th. I also want to say something about the office itself and how we can actually channel money. I think it's important to say that the Liberal Democrats are determined to cut the costs of the administration of the office. The overall budget is about 5.7 million, but too much of that is spent on big salaries, administration, advisors, officials. We want more police and more youth officers, not more politicians and more political advisors. So you want to double down on reducing costs. And crucially, I'm not going to accept the £80,000 a year salary if I get elected. I've said I'll only take a salary equivalent to what I get at the moment as a university lecturer, about £43,000. And the difference will be put directly into youth services. And I think it's that sort of commitment that demonstrates a genuine determination to resolve these sort of problems, but resolve them not by simply a police commissioner telling people what to do, but by genuinely getting community organisations involved, working with schools, working with the voluntary sector, working with teachers and parents to really find out what the fundamental problems are, and providing the youth support services there to support young people who are vulnerable and are following the wrong path. I also think there's basic things we can do in our communities to make sure there are decent alternatives to joining gangs and to getting involved in things like, for instance, knife crime. I think, having good sporting facilities, good sporting organisations, having people from the local football clubs and cricket clubs and so forth that getting involved in the community to provide inspirational leadership for young people. All these are part of the voluntary services and youth services strategy that I would pursue if I was Police Commissioner.
Thank you so much, James. I'm going to move straight on to Rupert. Here we go.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I didn't come here to attack anyone or slag them off, so I'm going to be a bit unusual for a politician. I'm going to start by agreeing with what James Moore has said. This isn't just about what the police do. It's not just about what the Police and Crime Commission does. It's also about encouraging communities to work together and to work together with the City Council or with the district councils in our Shire area in order to try and solve what is a very difficult and intractable problem. So, for instance, the Police and Crime Commissioner also has a budget for funding projects. I know that at the moment they're working with the Leicester City Football Club outreach group with young people to try and keep them out of the temptations of a criminal lifestyle or getting involved with drugs. There are other projects like the Up Project and so on. Now, I've been in touch with a lot of these projects that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner helps to fund, and they do some fantastic work. And I would be looking to continue with a lot of those projects and hopefully to start funding a lot of new ones. So I think James is absolutely right when he's talking about getting the community and voluntary groups involved here. But there's also a lot that the police can do themselves. I think a lot of the problems between young people and the police is that the first time a young person has a face-to-face encounter with a police officer is very often when something's going wrong. Either there's been a car crash or there's some sort of incident in the street, or could just be, my first encounter with a police officer, I was walking home from a friend's house late at night and a police officer just stopped me to ask me where I was going and what I was doing. I think it's really important that our young people grow up with a very positive attitude towards the police and have a very positive image of the police. And that's why one of the policies I've got in my manifesto is that every school should have a police liaison officer, that police officer should go into the school 3 or 4 times a year, not because anything's wrong, but to talk to the young people about issues that they're going to come across out on the streets, and also to present the police uniform as being a force for good, a thing that people should have a positive image of, something that people should be friendly towards. And therefore, when our young people are out on the streets, if they see a police officer, they're going to have a very positive image of that police officer. And in the long term, what I would be hoping is that by the time those young people are leaving school or leaving university, they're going to seriously consider the police as a career. It's a great career. I'd recommend it to pretty much anybody. And by fostering a positive relationship between the police and young people, and also between the community and the police and working together, I think probably, this is something that's probably going to take 3 or 4 years, being realistic. But we can get to a situation where across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, our young people have a positive image of the police and our police have a positive image of young people. And I think that's the way we're going to solve this.
Thank you very much. The second, my next question will start with you, Rupert, and James will be always in the middle, and Ross will be this time last one. This is a very good question, and many people who are interviewed during my preparing of this program have in heart of it. If you are elected, how will you engage a grassroots communities organization who understand their communities to prevent crime? And they mean meaningful engagement. That's what they are underlining, meaningful engagement with all communities.
Okay.
Is that going to Rupert?
Well,
Yes.
Okay.
First, Rupert, please.
Okay. It is an absolutely key part of the job that the Police and Crime Commissioner stays in touch with the public. Some of that can be done through grassroots organisations, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about perhaps neighbourhood groups in the city or parish council out in the Shire areas. It is absolutely essential that the Police and Crime Commissioner spends a lot of their time talking to those groups, but also talking to the public directly. whoever is elected next week, and obviously I hope it's myself, the Conservative candidate, the first thing they've got to do is to get in place a policing plan and consult on that before putting it into effect. I've already mentioned about the manifesto that you can go and read on rupertmatthews.org.uk. I'm intending that to be the basis of my policing plan, but I'm not going to force it on anybody. I'm going to go out to consultation. I'm going to make sure that not only all the community groups that you've been talking about, but also that a bit of paper goes through the door of every residential property in the city and the 2 counties, so that everybody is aware of the draft policing plan. Everybody will have an opportunity to comment on it. And once we've got that consultation dealt with, the amended policing plan is the one that will be put in place and will form the basis for the strategy of the police going forwards for the next 3 years. I'll also be holding public meetings across the city and across the 2 counties over the course of the next 3 years, and there will be regular opportunities for the people and organisations such as the ones you're talking about to get in touch with the Police and Crime Commissioner, to get in touch with the office, and to play a real role in making sure that the strategy the police are following is the strategy that the public want them to follow. That's a key part of the job.
Totally understand that, Rupert. I just want to, sorry to interrupt you there. I just want to say, to engage with the grassroots community organisations, will there be extra funds given by the Police Crime Commissioner? Because it's all good. I keep hearing a lot of people say, we're going to engage more with community organisations. We're going to engage more with community organisations. However, they need funds. They need to be funded correctly and appropriately, and this is what's been happening. Funds keep getting cut from our grassroots communities, so we can't expect them to keep engaging with you. So you mentioned about all this, what you're going to do. Is there any specific budgets in mind over your 3-year terms that you're going to reinvest into the community organizations? And also, I just want to mention, if you keep your answers short and sweet, we can ask more questions. A lot of community members are really messaging in, and we have got 3 candidates, and we want to take all 3 candidates' views. So please bear with us. You know, we will be live until 2 p.m. until our next show does start. So we've only got till 2 p.m. So yeah, carry on.
Okay, well, I was asking a politician to keep it short. Okay, I'll do my best. Yes, there are funds available to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office to put out there and to fund, but for specific purposes. They're not there just to fund an organisation because they're a good organisation. It has to be done to reduce crime. If I'm elected and when I take over as Police and Crime Commissioner, one of the first things that I'm going to do is to say that we're not automatically rolling over any of the contracts we've got with organisations at the moment. I'll be inviting bids from other organisations, and anybody who wants funds from the Police and Crime Commissioner's office and can demonstrate that what they're going to do with it will help to reduce crime, that is what I want to do. Was that short enough?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to James now. Is that right, Hashim?
Yes,
okay.
James.
Okay, James. Here we go.
I mean, I develop a new crime prevention strategy based on full consultation.
Just to let you know, James, at 1 o'clock, we will be going into our commercials sharp at 1 p.m. So I'll give you a quick hands up, 30 seconds. So at 1 p.m, we'll go into our commercials and we'll be straight back. Thank you.
I'll keep it short. I mean, I just wanted to say that I would review the whole operation of local crime prevention initiatives. Yes, funding is an issue, but I think the Police and Crime Commissioner, because he has his own funds, he can use leverage with local councils to raise more funds for crime prevention. So I would be going to local councils, and I've already talked to the Liberal Democrat councils in these circumstances, and say, well, look, you know, we've got a budget from the Police Commissioner. Can you match it, or can you contribute to this budget for help local crime prevention initiatives? And then we can build in local organisations into coherent strategies. So it's about really funding strategies, not just funding organisations. Local organisations will be involved in delivering those strategies, but that's the way I'd like to see it. And it has to be results-led. I mean, clearly we have to fund organisations that have a track record or really good ideas to bring about crime prevention effectively. Crucially too, though, we need to build back neighbourhood policing. You know, we can't have effective neighbourhood policing without crime prevention, and we can't have effective crime prevention without good neighbourhood policing, because the police need to be able there on the doorstep in the communities, collecting information, collecting intelligence, working with local communities, getting to understand those communities, to really understand what the problems are. I mean, this is a massive area we're talking about. It's Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And frankly, the issues of, say, hate crime in Leicester can be prevented in very different ways than, say, the theft of farm machinery in Rutland. These are very different sorts of crimes and need different strategies and different knowledge bases. So it's about engaging with the community. It's about involving communities across Leicestershire. And yes, it is about providing funding. It is about using the leverage that our office actually has, not only to actually spend money directly, but also to persuade other agencies, including other tiers of local government, particularly district councils, to put their own hands in their pockets and to support local initiatives wherever they can.
Okay, thank you. James. We've just got over a minute left. So you're saying, do the community really want to see more police officers in there, or do we really want to see community organisations being funded? I'm saying you need to do both. The crucial thing is that the police need to be there at neighbourhood level to work with community organisations, and because neighbourhood organisations can often train the police. There's obviously formal training that the police do, but the local officers learn an awful lot from community organisations and their community involvement. So we need both good neighbourhood policing and we need good crime prevention initiatives driven by voluntary organisations. Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure you made that point clear to the public there, because you're saying, okay, having lots of police officers on the street is great, but also, hang on, do we really need the extra police officers on the street? Why are we not funding our local organizations that know the community better? And that may be helping more.
Yeah, we need to do both. That's the crucial thing. We need to have the police there on the doorstep, but it's no good having the police there unless they're actually connected to the community, unless they're involved with community organisations. That's my point, really. We need to have both.
Okay. In 15 seconds, all communities, how are you going to reach all of them?
We still got to speak to Ross about the current question. So we're going to come back inside 30 seconds. We're going to go straight into our commercials in 30 seconds. Just to let you know, our commercials go automatically, so we have no control. That's the way I have set. That's the way we've set our commercials up, so they go automatically going on right now. So we'll be back straight after about 3 minutes after the commercial. We'll be speaking to Ross Willmott about the last question about community engaging with local communities on the grassroots level. Here we go.
EAVA, sharing the richness of cultures. This is EAVA FM.
હેલો જલ્દીથી હાલો તમારી ગાડીમાં બેસી જાઓ દર વર્ષની જેમ આ વર્ષે પણ પ્રખ્યાત અનુભવી કેરીના વેપારી મુકેશભાઈ કેરીનો ભરપૂર ખજાનો લઈને આવી ગયા છે, જેવી કે તલાલા જુનાગઢની કેસર, રત્નાગીરી, હાપુસ, રાજાપુરી, તોતાપુરી, બદામી તેમજ તમામ દેશની કેરી સાથે વોટરમેલન, શાકભાજી, ઇન્ડિયન ગ્રોસરી જરૂરથી મળશે. તમે આવશો અને સગા સંબંધીને પણ લાવશો. તમારા બધાના સ્નેહ અને સહકાર સાથે ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર. મેળવવાનું સર શ્રી સાઈ સુપર સ્ટોર 146 Checkers Road, LE45EQ, phone number 0116-266-144 and Santi Superstore, Evington Road.
Serving the community. 102.5 EAVA FM.
How has the pandemic impacted you and your community's health? Our researchers at the University of Leicester would like to hear your views about government information and resources provided, and what is the best way to communicate health messages to your community. If you're from the South Asian, African or Afro-Caribbean community and want to share your reflections, you will be invited to take part in a group or one-to-one discussion, and your views will be kept confidential. You'll also receive a £20 gift voucher to thank you for taking part. For more information or to take part, please contact Barbara on bmc15@leicester.ac.uk. That's bmc15@leicester.ac.uk. The University of Leicester.
Serving the community 24 hours a day. EAVA FM.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can finally get out of the house and do some of the things we've all been missing, like meeting friends over a takeaway coffee, visiting family for a barbecue. Around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. That could be your friend, relative, or even you. Help stop the spread by reducing travel and meeting outside. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, space, and fresh air.
Serving the community. 102.5 EAVA FM.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can meet up outside in groups of up to 6 or 2 households. Have friends round for a drink in the garden. There you are. doing your bit, keeping a safe distance. When it starts to get dark and a little chilly, and suddenly your lounge looks very warm and inviting. But don't forget, you're much safer in the fresh air because COVID-19 particles are blown away. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, and fresh air.
EAVA FM is a multilingual radio station serving the diverse communities of Leicester on 102.5 FM. For advertising and sponsorship, email sales@eavafm.com or call 07811 659 364. That's 07811 659 364. Serving the community, 102.5 EAVA FM.
Okay, hi all, we're back, EAVA FM 102.5, and this is the live special Police and Crime Commissioners Election Talk 2021. We have all three candidates with us, and where we left off, the question was, how will you engage with grassroots community organizations who know and understand their communities to be part of preventing crime? So the last two candidates did answer, so we're going to take it over to Ross so he can answer the question.
An underlining bit is a meaningful engagement with all communities.
Okay, Ross.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think it's absolutely important question. And first and foremost, we have to make sure that the grassroots organizations are there and that they can survive. So I think, it's back to what you were saying about resources. We do need to provide the money from both the police, that £5.7 million, and indeed local authorities to support those grassroots organisations, because without them, we are not going to hear their voices and be able to engage with them. And I've done that in the past as leader of the City Council. I'm the only one with a track record of having done so. And I think then it's about the Police and Crime Commissioner doing it firsthand. It's also about the police officers doing it so that they are engaging with people. But you can't do that unless you've got the police officers. And I have to say, I do find it hard to believe both the Liberal Democrat and Tory candidates when they say they're going to put more police on the beat, when it was their government in power, the Lib Dem Tory government, that axed 550 police from our streets. So that's why we haven't got them there talking to people in St Matthews as we used to have. So, I'm pledged to increase the police numbers in neighbourhoods so that engagement can take place. So firstly, funding the grassroots organisations and then funding the neighbourhood police teams so that they can work together, and also working with other voluntary organisations as well to deal with mental health issues, to deal with homelessness, to deal with young people carrying knives. All those things are really important. And the real crucial way of stopping all that is through meaningful engagement with communities. And that is not a one-off consultation every 3 years on a crime and policing plan. That's ongoing work every day of the week, every week of the year, having a conversation and keeping the door open for community groups, whether that's in Colville, Loughborough or St Matthews, or in Saffron or in New Parks, in Highfields, in Leicester. All of those communities, they all have religious organisations, they all have housing groups, they all have voluntary groups and community groups, they have young people's groups, all of which we must foster and support so that we can engage with them. So, that's my clear commitment to people. And Labour has done that, and we've done that in the city. Willie has done that as Labour Police and Crime Commissioner with a big local project in St Matthews, but it's not enough. I want to do more and take that further in my 3-year term. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going the other order. I'll be starting with Rupert. This is a very touchy issue for the whole communities, and it's recent knife crimes in the city, which many young lives were lost. If you're elected, what prevention methods you will use to reduce the knife crime? The knife crime is taking our youngsters early, and it is something that has been increasing, and all the communities are feeling this issue. Rupert, please.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to Ross first. I do apologise.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I infringed my own law. It will start with Ross now and then going up. Thank you.
I thought so.
Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Yes. I mean, I've already touched on knife crime in my previous answer. It is a serious issue. For every life that's lost is a huge tragedy. And I've worked with the people in Leicester, Mrs. Armour Trading, and the other groups that were set up following the murder of her son with a knife. And I think that we have to work with organisations like that organisation to stop people carrying knives, young people in particular. We also have worked and funded the Warning Zone project, which is all about young people being aware of what is dangerous. It discourages and works with children at primary school age to discourage them carrying knives, being violent, getting involved in dangerous situations. And I think through those training programs in the voluntary and community sector, funded by myself as Police and Crime Commissioner, we can make a difference. But then we have to work with the young people in schools and through these voluntary organisations to explain to them on a one-to-one basis and in small groups why carrying a knife could end up in them being killed. Because we know that young people often are carrying a knife because they think it's a form of protection. But of course, it's a weapon that can be turned against them in a violent situation. And so the only safe way to behave is not to carry a knife. And we have to work not just by catching and people who are carrying knives, but working in the first place, back to the prevention is absolutely crucial to stop young people carrying knives in the first place. And I think that's where I would want to see more investment of the police budget. It is a serious issue. It's not as bad in Leicester as it is elsewhere, and we have to be determined that it doesn't get as bad in Leicester. So we have to also bring in other services as well, because we've got young people with mental health problems whose behaviour might seem to exhibit, be unacceptable, but actually what they need, they don't need putting in a police cell. What they need is help and support from mental health services and from the NHS and from the youth service and so on. But often we've seen that the police aren't always responding in that way, with things like stop and search and so on, which can be seen to be threatening to communities rather than supportive. So I think we've got to understand what's causing the problem.
Okay. Ross, I'm just wanting to hurry up a little bit with we've got the others as well. Please do, candidates, please do think about your fellow candidates that are going to speak as well. Do you want to finish off, Ross?
Yes. I was quite brief on the last question, but I'm happily to wind up and say that I think it's a serious issue. I want to see more investment in tackling knife crime, and I think we can do that by working in partnership and engaging with community organisations and particularly young people.
Thank you,
James.
Yeah, so James, very specific about knife crime. This is very specific knife crime.
I hope you can still see me because my screen's gone blank for some reason. I'm not sure. Can you still hear me?
We can see you.
Specifically on knife crime, I think crucially is restoring youth services and ensuring there's long-term support for youth services too. I mean, I think it's no surprise if you actually cut neighbourhood police, you cut school liaison officers from the police, and you cut youth services, as both the Conservatives and Labour have done, then it's no surprise that sadly you get resurgence in youth crime, not just knife crime, but youth crime more generally. And it's very important, I think, that we properly understand knife crime. I think knife crime is probably different in Leicester than it is in, for instance, the Metropolitan Police area. I've spoken to the Chief Constable about that, and he very much agrees with that analysis. But I think it's important to have the right kind of role models in the community as well. And again, this is really where voluntary organisations need to be involved alongside school liaison officers to go into schools to explain the problems of knife crime and to also talk to youngsters, to talk to them about why they're carrying knives. We often talk about people who carry knives as actually perpetrators of crimes. Well, in a sense, they're also victims of crime, in the sense that, particularly if they're very young, they've been led into a situation where they feel for some reason the need to carry a knife. Now, we need to explain on an individual basis why that is. We need to talk to these young people, and they are often actually quite young children in some cases, and find out what are the forces to encourage them to do this in the first place. And and then try to find solutions on a one-to-one basis. Because although I think some of the knife crime in Leicester is related to gangland issues, I don't think it's anywhere near as linked to gangland issues as in, for instance, in parts of London. So I think it's a more complex issue. And I think by talking to young people and really building back youth services so they can have confidence in youth services support, I think we will get there eventually. And we certainly must stop being complacent and really actually dedicate the funds we need to youth services and rebuild youth services in Leicestershire, not just in Leicester.
All right, thank you so much for that, James.
Thank you.
And Rupert.
Well, I think the other two candidates are right. This is a very complex issue. We've taken years to get it here. It's taken 20 years for the level of knife crime to rise to where we are now. There aren't any really simple answers to this, and it is going to take a multi-agency approach. I think in the short term, stop and search does have a very important role to play here. If the police are stopping people on the street who are acting a little bit odd, a little bit suspiciously, that is a way to take knives off the streets, and where the person perhaps deserves it, prosecutions as well. The prevalence of knives partly is driven by drugs gangs and the way in which they will have turf wars over trying to establish their territory for selling drugs. But there is a much wider issue that many teenagers, and it is mainly teenage boys, I'm afraid, feel the need to carry a knife. And of course, once they're carrying a knife, they can get involved in a knife fight, and that can lead to bloodshed and far too often to death. That's another reason why I'm so keen to get police officers into schools as liaison officers, to talk to the young people and to explain to them the dangers of knives, and also, as we've heard from the Liberal Democrat candidate here, role models. They can be very important. I think that some of the work that Leicester City Football Club is doing here is absolutely great. We need to recruit younger people who are much closer in age to the vulnerable teenagers who can get sucked into carrying a knife. They need to be making a very proactive case as to why it's the wrong thing to do. So I think we've got to have a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. There isn't a magic answer to this, but I'm absolutely convinced that by getting the police out into the community, by getting the police engaged with young people, and to providing the sort of correct sort of role models, then eventually we will get there. But we should also see a short, sharp cut in knife crime if we use stop and search properly.
Okay. Thank you for that.
It will start with Rupert now. Vijay.
Okay, we'll start with Rupert. Okay, so we've got this question. This is again coming straight directly from the community. How are you going to improve on services to support people coming out of prison, to reduce reoffending? And they are looking into reforming. Are you looking into reforming probation? This is where a lot of offenders stayed. This is where it's really failing. We're seeing a lot of reoffending happening in our city. How are you going to improve people coming out of the prison cell? And that's going to
I mean, several strands to this, as I'm sure you can imagine. First of all, there are some charities and other working groups who are working with people as they come out of prison and trying very hard to get them into gainful employment, because one of the most reliable indicators of whether a person is going to reoffend after a spell in prison or not is whether they get a job. And so getting these people into full-time employment or even part-time employment is incredibly important. And I would like to see the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office putting real effort into making that happen and providing funds to organisations that do it. But people can only get jobs if there are jobs there to be had. And so it is important that we build back better after all the COVID restrictions that we've been suffering from, particularly in Leicester City. The police have a role to play in making Leicester a safe place to do business, whether that's having foot patrols in retail areas to reduce shoplifting or pickpocketing and things like that, whether it is having a strong online presence to try and curb online fraud and so on. We need to work with business organisations. The police need to work with businesses to keep business safe, because that will provide the jobs that are needed. We also, again, I keep coming back to this, I know, working with young people, police officers going into schools, working with those youth groups that still exist, or those groups that attract a lot of young people. It is absolutely essential the police get the message across their life of crime in wrong.
I just want to interrupt you there. I'm sorry to. Basically, you mentioned that charities are doing some of this work.
Yes.
You mentioned that at the start. Should it be charities doing the work, or should it be our police service doing this work? And this is the biggest question we need to ask. The employability programs for people reoffending, I feel it shouldn't be left to the charities or the community organizations. Yes, they can support, but I think the core work should be done by our police service and the probation service, don't you feel? And because they're not funded enough.
Well, no, I'm going to disagree with you, I'm afraid. I don't think this is properly the job of the police force itself. This is why the Police and Crime Commissioner's job title has got Police and Crime Commissioner in it, because there are a lot of responsibilities for crime prevention, and that does include the rehabilitation of offenders. Certainly local councils, the city council, the district council, they've got a role to play here as well. But the police force itself, no, I don't think that's the right vehicle for doing this.
Not really. I'm not saying just the police force itself. What I'm trying to say is you should be working very closely with the probation service in itself and working together and helping to fund that whole. Really?
Oh, absolutely. Like I say, this is why the Police and Crime Commission has got the crime bit in the job title. It is a part of the job of the Police and Crime Commission.
Okay.
To liaise with all these organisations, and the Commissioner can do is get different bodies and different organisations in one room to discuss the problems together and get them to cooperate. Very important.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rupert. We're going to move on to James. James, we did lose you there. I can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go on.
Great. Apologies for that. I missed a few of Rupert's comments, so apologies if I repeat anything he said. I mean, I think the crucial thing is, of course, the police commissioner is not responsible for the probation service, but he can foster close relationships with the probation service. And he can also help the probation service work with local organisations and support local people to come out of situations which have led them into crime in the first place. And I think one of the crucial things is what do we need to have, as normal individuals, to have a successful life? Well, we need family there, and some people lack the family support that many of us take for granted. We need to feel involved in a community. It might be a community organisation, it might be a sports club, it might be just simply being friends in a local pub or something like that. But we need to feel that we're part of a community. We need to have a network that supports us. And crucially, we also need to have a job, and we need to have a way of making a income in a meaningful way. And so many people who come out of prison, even for those coming out of prison for relatively trivial offences, come out and find it very, very difficult to get back into the jobs market, because particularly in places where competition for jobs is very high. So we need I think, much more, not just a probation system, but also more of a community mentoring system, which actually helps people get back into the job market. So people get support not just from the probation service, but from community organisations and voluntary groups, and give them the right sort of skills to get back into the jobs market. And also can help them access opportunities. I mean, going to a job centre is not always the best way to get a job, bizarrely enough. Often, community networks, neighbourhood networks, friendship networks that are where you find your way back into the employment market. So making sure there's the community support there to actually help people who come out of prison, and to make sure that people don't become disengaged and drift back to crime is absolutely crucial. I mean, in Britain, we have a terrible record for reoffending. I think it's something that we really have to take far more seriously. Probation service does do a lot of work, but as we said, it's underfunded. And we need to involve voluntary organisations and community organisations much more, because they're often really quite effective at helping people back into society and getting them back into the jobs market.
Okay, thank you, James. We're going to move straight on to Ross.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's a really important question and an issue. Many crimes are caused by reoffending from people who are leaving prison, who left prison. And I think we need, therefore, if we could tackle that problem, we would reduce the number of crimes and criminal activity in our city and county. So I think it's absolutely fundamental that the police and probation and everybody else work closely together with local authorities so that when somebody leaves prison, they have a house, they have a home, a roof over their head, and that doesn't happen at the moment, and it's absolutely crucial that it must happen. They have a possibility of work or training. They have support, particularly mental health support, because after all, it's not going to be good. It's going to be a shock to people coming out of prison and adjusting back into ordinary life. And we need to have a proper and good probation service. Now, this is you can't get away from this. The Lib Dem Conservative government privatised the probation service. They put it into the hands of people who needed to make money out of the probation service. I think it's totally wrong that was done. And even the Tory government now, Boris Johnson has acknowledged that was a mistake, and they're bringing the probation service back into the public sector. Things like probation, things like mental health provision need to be in the public and voluntary sectors, not in the hands of people who are trying to make money out of the service, because it just has proved not to work. So we've had a really, really bad and poor probation service over the last few years, and I'm pleased it's coming back into the public sector and will be better. So I'd want to be working as Police and Crime Commissioner closely with the probation service, closely with the councils and with the housing associations, so that nobody left prison without a roof over their head to go to. And that's got to be the first point. Then we can look at the work at Timpson's, the dry cleaners and shoe repairers. They have taken on more ex-offenders than any other employer in the country. And they have proved that ex-offenders make good employees. So we need to break down the prejudice and the attitudes of people towards ex-offenders and get employers to take them on board. That requires work with our FE colleges, training providers, and so on. I think we need to go even before that and increase the amount of work we do in restorative justice programs. I know Willie Bark, the current Labour Police and Crime Commissioner himself, will want to fund restorative justice, but in some ways that stops people going into prison in the first place. They pay a penalty, which is linked to their crime, by making a community reparation. And I think that is a better way than putting somebody in prison, because prison tends to reinforce criminal tendencies. It doesn't tend to help them. That's why there's so much reoffending. So I'm very clear: housing, jobs, support, and a proper publicly run probation service, and not the privatisation that the Tories have forced into the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next question will start with Ross now. It is a question about the police representation to be the mirror of the community they serve. What your plans, if elected, to increase the bulk of the police officers so that they can be the mirror? What I'm talking about is increasing a Bame community in the police force. What your plans are?
This is a really important issue, Hashim, and at the moment the police force...
Sorry, Ross, I just want to talk about it. I think we've had a couple of questions from the community regarding recruitment in the police force and what the plans moving forward are. So rather than asking separate questions on recruitment, is that right, Hashim? We've had a lot of people contact us regarding recruitment, right?
Go on.
So basically, what are the recruitment plans for the police crime commissioner? What are your recruitment plans, and how are you going to diversify recruitment altogether? Just be aware, at 1:30 we will be going into the commercials. So Ross, please go for it. You've got up until 1:30 to talk about this, and we'll give everyone 5 minutes, just below 5 minutes, to speak about recruitment and the police and crime commissioner role.
Right. Well, of course, the first point you'd expect me to make is you can't get a more diverse workforce if you're not recruiting police. And it's only under a Labour Police and Crime Commissioner that we've been able to recruit any new police. The Tories, don't forget, cut by 550, 20,000 nationally. So there's no way you're going to get a more diverse police force when you've got a Tory government axing the police. But what we've been able to do in Leicester and Leicestershire is create 289 new police officer posts. And I want to double that figure in the next 3 years. And also, as part of that, we need to make sure those new police officers are reflective of the diverse community in the city and county. So I want to work with the Sikh Police Association, the Muslim Police Association, and so on, about in terms of ways of recruiting from those communities. We now have one, I believe, Somali police officer, the first, in Leicester, which is great news, but we need a lot more than just one. And I think there is a lot of barriers, a lot of work to be done. About less than 10% of the entire police force is from the black and minority ethnic communities, whereas in the population as a whole, we're talking 30 to 40% of the population, and much higher in the city, of course. And it's absolutely crucial, I think, in terms of the need for trust between communities and the police, that the police look like, to use Hashim's word, the community they are serving alongside. And I think it's all about the trust that can engender if the police force are truly representative. Now, that's not going to be a quick job, but if we are recruiting more police, then we have to have positive policies in place to ensure that we are working with the communities, clearly explaining what the career in the police is going to be like, working with schools and starting very early, because I think a lot of people, and a lot of young people, especially from the minority communities, do not see themselves having a career in the police force. So first we have to establish the trust by getting them to meet police officers. We could have placements of young people working in police environments where it's safe to do so. We can have police officers working with community groups, with youth groups, so that they get to know them and can see what the work is. But also, there are jobs behind the scenes as well. Not every.
Sorry, to interrupt you. Do you have a number in mind over the next 3 years that you wish to have recruited within Leicestershire Constabulary?
Well, I would at least. I mean, I haven't got a number, a target. I think it's useful to have a target. I certainly would want to double where we are now, and I think that might be possible with the recruitment. It'll all depend, obviously, on how many new police officers we can recruit. The other thing that's really important, of course, is that if for BME communities and people joining the police, is that they can see career progression. I know there's been a lot written nationally about the fact that the black police officers do not get promoted within the police as far as their white colleagues do. So again, we need to look at that as an issue. And I think it's all about being open and honest about these issues and reflecting on them and seeking advice and guidance from where it works best. So looking at good practice elsewhere, looking at our own practice. I know that the Chief Constable and his senior team are committed to this. There's no question about that. So we need to find the tools and instruments to do it. But you can only do it if you recruit more police officers. You can't do it if you're a Conservative and you're cutting the police. You know, you can't do that.
Sharing the richness of cultures. This is EAVA FM.
Everyone can now get free rapid COVID-19 tests twice a week. They show your results within 30 minutes. They also show you're doing what you can to protect your loved ones, your friends, your workmates, and that you want to keep life moving again. Around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. That could be a friend, a relative, a workmate. It could even be you. Rapid tests are easy to get from nhs.uk/get tested. Let's take this next step safely.
Serving the community. 102.5 EAVA FM.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can go to more places, like pubs, restaurants, hairdressers and gyms. However, around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. By quickly checking into venues with the NHS COVID-19 app, you can help stop the virus spreading and protect your family and friends. So whenever you go out, check in. Let's take this next step safely.
Serving the community 24 hours a day. EAVA FM.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can get together again outside. Have a picnic for 6 in the park. Separate blankets and lots of space, obviously. But what if another friend walks by? It'd be rude not to invite them over, wouldn't it? The more people you meet, the greater your risk of getting COVID-19. So only meet in groups of up to 6 or 2 households. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, space, and fresh air.
Serving the community. 102.5 EAVA FM.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can finally meet up again outside. But we want to do more than just meet up, don't we? Would a quick hug do any harm? Around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. That could be a friend, a relative. It could even be you. It's hard, but don't get too close. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, space, and fresh air.
English, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, Chinese, South African, Sri Lankan, Polish, Somali, French, West African, Arabic, Swahili. The voice of Leicester. This is EAVA FM.
EAVA FM is a multilingual radio station serving the diverse communities of Leicester on 102.5 FM. For advertising and sponsorship, email sales@eavafm.com or call 07811 659 364. That's 07811 659 364. Serving the community, 102.5 EAVA FM.
EAVA FM 102.5. Sorry, Ross, to get you cut off there. I did say you will only have till 1:30 sharp. So yeah, we're going to move on. This is about recruitment, specifically going to James.
Well, what depresses me about the issue of police recruitment is that we've been here for so long. I mean, I remember as a student union activist back in the very early 1990s, talking in public debates about the importance of creating a more diverse police service, bringing people from different backgrounds into the police service and making sure it properly reflects the community. And since then, we've had Conservative governments and indeed Labour governments. We've got to remember, despite what Ross says, Labour were in government from 1997 to 2010. There was umpteen Labour Home Secretaries, and the reality is very little changed, and we've had Labour Police Commissioners, and frankly often very little has changed in terms of the national picture. So I think we've got to stop talking about this as we have been doing over the last 30 years and actually do something, and that means going directly into schools, going directly into communities and asking young people, why not consider recruiting the police? Actually taking young people into police stations, on patrol with police officers, taking them out in police cars, showing them what it is to be a police officer, building those community links by building good school liaison officers. As I've said, I think that's absolutely crucial. The school liaison officer role is very, very important in building those community links and explain to people that this is a career for everybody. It's not just for one particular ethnic group or one particular social class. It's for absolutely everybody. And as I said, I think it's a fantastic career for people of all backgrounds, but we do need to be far more proactive and have not only a local strategy in Leicestershire and Rutland, but a national strategy to solve this fundamental iniquitous system of police recruitment. It's clearly not doing its job, and we need to find ways of changing it. I think some of the actual recent changes that have taken place, including actually, for instance, requiring graduate level of education, might actually make it more difficult to recruit police officers from ethnic minority backgrounds rather than less. So I think we've got to really look at the whole system of police recruitment at national level. But locally, where I can, I'm determined to use the police liaison system to get into schools, to talk to young people from all backgrounds about getting involved in the police, and particularly working through community organisations which we know are underrepresented. We went into contact a few weeks ago with the African Heritage Group in Leicester about talking about how we can try to increase those from a Afro-Caribbean background in the police. I think that's a group that's particularly limited. And we've got to actually do something, not just keep talking about it. That's my fundamental message.
All right, thank you so much for that, James. And
next, Rupert.
Yes, absolutely. This is an important issue. Now, when the modern police force was founded, getting on for 200 years ago now, Sir Robert Peel said that the police are the public and the public are the police, because he knew that for the police force to be effective, they have to have the consent of the population as a whole, and that means they've got to be reflective of the population as a whole. I take this so seriously. Actually, I put it on the front cover of my manifesto, that quote, the police are the public and the public are the police. And if anyone goes to my website, rupertmatthews.org.uk, they can have a look at my manifesto and see that, and also read what my plans are to doing that. Now, if you look at the logjam, where the problem is with getting members of all sorts of different communities into the police, the problem actually is getting them to apply in the first place. The Leicestershire police are absolutely brilliant at making sure that those who apply feel welcome, that they are given every assistance in their application to the police. But it's getting people to apply in the first place. I've already talked about having school liaison officers to give a very positive image of the police to teenagers so that they do consider the police as a career. I'm going to agree with James, the Liberal Democrat candidate here. Actually, I think that making the police an all degree, that you have to have a university degree before you can apply, I think that's a retrograde step. I don't think that's the right way forwards. We should be providing the training once people have joined the police force to get them up to that level of educational attainment. I'm also looking to the associations in the police force. We've got a Sikh association, we've got a Black Police Association. They should be getting out into the community and making the case to their communities to join the police. And the more applications that the Leicestershire Police can get from different communities, the quicker we're going to be able to live up to that ideal that Sir Robert Peel, a great Conservative Home Secretary, by the way, had when he founded the police force in the first place. We've got to make everyone feel welcome into the police, but we've got to encourage them to apply in the first place.
Okay, thank you for that. Hashim, question?
The next question is very important for many communities. It is hate crimes. Hate crimes are very hateful crimes that leave a scar the victims, and they're not confined to only one community. The Sikhs have difficulties, the Hindus and the Black communities, the Muslim communities. So these hideous crimes that are intentionally done to the victims, to tackle these hideous crimes, what are your preventative reduction plans if you are elected? And I'll start with Rupert.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's bad enough being a victim of crime.
Rupert, sorry to interrupt. I'm the one that's policing this whole talk here. Just want to mention we've got 20 minutes left to the show. So if you guys want to keep your answers very specific, very clear, as much as possible, we can get as many questions in as possible. There are a few more questions coming up, so please be aware of that. I think hate crime is very high up there in part of what the police and crime commissioner should be looking at. So please, let's keep it really, really specific. Be really clear on your answers so we can really get as many questions in the next 20 minutes as possible. Thank you, Rupert. Go for it.
Okay, I'll keep it as short as I can. Yes, the police have got to take hate crime seriously. So not just when it's a crime, but when the motivation for that crime was hate of a person, perhaps because of their race or because of their religion. If that is what the person who is a victim of crime genuinely believes, the police have to take that seriously and investigate the motive for the crime as well as the crime itself. I think this is, and also, of course, it can help solve the crime if you know what the motivation for it is. That can be a help as well. But we do need to draw a distinction between hate crime and hate incidents where no crime has actually been committed. Hate crime is clearly much more serious of the two, and I would be very keen to see the police concentrate on that. But the key is to getting the police to take the accusations of hate seriously in the first place. I actually think the Leicestershire police do a good job on this, so I'd be quite happy to continue where we are. We are getting on top of it. We need to stay on top of it. We need to make sure these crimes are treated with the seriousness they deserve.
James.
Well, to borrow a phrase from a former Prime Minister, I think it's important that we're both tough on hate crime, but also tough on the causes of hate crime. I think it's important that we have properly trained, dedicated officers to deal with hate crime who understand the seriousness of the crime and deal with it effectively. It's important that those officers are accountable so that we understand how hate crime is dealt with and how victims are supported. But it's also important, just one step before that, to ensure that we have proper systems of reporting for hate crime. Although the police are pretty good on this, it's important that victims feel that they can report hate crime and are fully supported in doing so. And it's not just a question of reporting hate crime, it's supporting people who are the victims and making sure that voluntary organisations, the public sector organisations and the police provide the appropriate support so people aren't marginalised and humiliated in the long term and feel that they can go about their daily business without fear of hate crime taking place in future. But I also want to stress the importance of tough on the causes of hate crime. I think the Brexit debate, the demonisation of migrants, the demonisation of certain religious communities, including, of course, by our own Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We all know what Boris Johnson said about Muslim women who wear certain form of clothing. Those sorts of racially driven languages need to be taken out of politics. Similarly, we need to actually make sure that as politicians, we don't pander to racist prejudice of any group in the community. We must make sure that we absolutely have zero tolerance of all forms of racism, and that includes in our own parties. And I'm afraid there has been a lot of arguments about Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. There have also been some appalling incidents of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which in one case even drove a Jewish Labour MP to leave the party in disgust. So I think it's not only a question of being tough on the hate crime itself and having proper strategies in place, but making sure that as politicians we have an absolute zero tolerance of hate language in everyday discourse.
Thank you, James. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to Ross.
Yes, I want a zero tolerance attitude towards hate crime and racism and Islamophobia in our police and, of course, in our city and county. And I think that, it's really, really important that every incident that's reported is taken seriously. I think part of the way of addressing the problem of hate crime is that when people have been a victim of hate crime, that they feel able to report it to the police and that the police will take it seriously. And I think we've got a way to go there yet. There was the awful incident. I mean, it exists in our city. I disagree with Rupert. It is a major problem. If you talk to the Muslim community, in particular in Leicester, and Muslim women in particular, the appalling statements of Boris Johnson and his racist stereotyping of Muslim women just feeds that on a local level. When the Prime Minister of England starts saying things about Muslim women which are unacceptable, then other people think it's okay to do so. So, it's about leadership, and that leadership is not there in the Conservative Party against Islamophobia. So the Police and Crime Commissioner has a pivotal role, because you are, as Police and Crime Commissioner, the leader and the voice of the police. So I would want to work with organisations like MEND, who have done a lot of work following the attempted murder of Zainab Hussein in Beaumont Leys, which what ended up being described by the police as a hate crime, but it wasn't at first. And I think it's really, really important to realise that that person who had attempted to murder her and her child was a far-right activist. And I think far-right activists are encouraged by some of the political rhetoric within the Conservative Party. And I think it's shameful that happens. So as Police and Crime Commissioner, I would be speaking out against any form of racism. I would be setting an example by bringing and welcoming all communities together and working with them, and be seen to be doing so. This is not just about meetings and papers and reports. This is about being out and about and working alongside all our communities. And I would want to have proper reporting, monitoring of that, and to make sure that every report is taken seriously. And I think then also I'd want to learn from the best practice elsewhere. I've mentioned this before. We don't have all the answers in Leicester and Leicestershire. I don't have all the answers. But I know that within the communities, people have got a lot of good ideas. I've had a lot of discussions already about Islamophobia, about racism, about hate crime with organisations, and there's plenty of good ideas out there about things that we could change. And they don't all cost money. It's about training, it's about attitude, it's about culture. But we need a zero tolerance approach to hate crime, especially in our multicultural city and county. It is so important that people can turn to the police for help, no matter what community they're from. Thank you.
Okay, Ross.
Next is Ross. Vijay.
Next question. This is something which is kind of leading on from hate crime, but that's more with public hate crime and how the police are going to tackle that. This is more within, as you are aware, within the police force. As you are aware, Leicester, during the Black Lives Matter march, Leicester was one of the cities out of UK that was there supporting Black Lives Matter movement. We've recently seen in Leicester that we're really supporters of this. So we've had a few of these messages come directly from the community around inequalities. So what will the Police Crime Commissioner put in place to ensure transparency and accountability to tackle inequality within the police force? So both within the police force itself, inequalities, and also any kind of brutality, police brutality happening to members of the public or cases. How will you be putting this more, enforcing this, or taking this higher priority within the community? I believe this is going to be Ross answering this.
Yes, Ross first.
I hope I've mentioned the question correctly. This is what we, by the way, all the questions we are being asked is directly from community members calling us, contacting us, putting them forward. So this is really good to have this. So yes, Ross, remember we've got just under 15 minutes left. I do want to ask one more question, so please bear that in mind. There is 3 candidates. We've got one final question left. Okay, thank you, Ross.
Well, I think the Black Lives Matters demonstration, which I was part of in Leicester City Centre, socially distanced, of course, showed us how important this issue is. And I felt that the police in Leicester handled it really well. It wasn't like the Sarah Everard demonstration and protest in London, where the Met behaved appallingly, I think, and oppressively. And I think that is because we've come a long way in Leicester and the police understand the communities, but there's still further to go to make sure that there isn't discrimination. We know that if you're black, you stand a 9 times more chance of being stopped and searched than if you're white. And that is still an issue. That is a fact. It's a Home Office fact. It's not published by me or the Labour Party. So that is something that we have to be really conscious of, aware of, and do something about. And that requires the more training, culture change, working with communities so that police are listening and understanding the cultural differences, and awareness of all of those issues, I think, is crucial. It also requires, back to my previous point, clear leadership from those at the top of the police force. Now, I think it is there and it has been there, but I pledge to continue that leadership, which says we will not tolerate inequality, we will not tolerate discrimination. And we will put in place, positive programs of training and support to encourage people from all our communities in Leicester to join the police force and to progress within the police force. Because it's not just a question of joining. You've got to deal with the glass ceiling syndrome, where people, the women or people from BME communities, are not getting promoted as well, and that's an issue I would want to address. Only by changing and then changing the diversity through recruitment that we've already talked about.
Can you just finish up, please?
Yeah. I think in those ways we can build a better relationship of trust between communities and police, and we can drive out inequalities. But it is about actually being the leader and championing the removal of any inequalities.
Thank you.
It's very important. Thank you.
James, stand now, please.
I'll keep it very brief. I agree with very much of what Ross has actually said there about the question of tackling inequalities. I was in correspondence with the Chief Constable about the actual Clapham Common issue to get his sort of perspectives on this, and how really Leicestershire are somewhat different in the way that they manage demonstrations like this. All demonstrations really are covered by College of Policing guidance, and the role for the police commissioner is to hold the police accountable, to make sure that police officers on the ground are aware of their responsibilities, that the commanders of demonstration understand what they need to do.
James, I just want to interrupt you. It wasn't so much about the protest, it was the reason of the protest. I want you to answer that question, the reason of the protest. How can we not see that happening anytime in Leicester? Just inequalities within the police force. Okay.
Well, I think that one of the problems with inequality in the police force is that the police force doesn't look like the general population. If you actually had more black officers, they'd understand what Black Lives Matter was about. I think on the whole, Leicestershire police are better than others, though. I think that's the important thing to stress. I think they are, certainly at the top level. Simon Cole is aware of the community sensitivity. He's worked a lot with different communities over the many years. But ultimately, we need to have more officers from black and ethnic minority populations to understand the experience of those populations and why Black Lives Matter is such an important issue for so many people, why people feel so strongly that they're not treated equally in modern society. It's completely wrong. So I think some of it is about training, some of it is about recruitment again, but also it's about the police commissioner holding the senior management to account, holding the senior management of the police to account. And that's really my job as police commissioner.
Okay, thank you, James.
Robert, please.
Yes, well, I'd agree that dealing with the inequalities within the police is really largely a matter of recruitment. We've already touched on that in some detail, so I won't go there. I'm going to pick you up on the thing about police brutality, because we do have a system for investigating complaints made against police, not just about brutality, but about corruption, about bad behaviour generally. I think we do actually have a bit of an issue here. These investigations can take months. They can sometimes take years, very often over complaints and issues that are really straightforward. What we've got to get into a position is where there is absolutely no place for brutality or corruption or bad behaviour at all amongst police officers. And that means that the police complaints procedure has got to work quickly, and it's got to work effectively, and it's got to work properly. I'm not convinced at the moment that that is happening. I think this is part of the problem with engendering a positive reaction, that, you know, somebody will make a complaint against the police. That police officer, is still being investigated 4 years later, and nothing is being done about the additional complaint. So while I agree with much of what's already been said, the police complaint procedure has got to be beefed up. And that is fair on the police as well. If a police officer has a complaint made against them which they think is unfair and incorrect, they deserve to be cleared quickly, just as a police officer acting properly deserves to be convicted and punished quickly as well. That is something we've got to get right.
Okay. Thank you for that, Rupert. We're not going to be asking the last question, unfortunately, because of time constraints. But however, I know Hashim does want to finish off before 2 p.m. and I think he's gonna give a great suggestion here. Go on, Hashim.
Thank you very much. You've been very brilliant, and the time is not on our side. And I wish every candidate for the best, and the best man wins the job. That's my good luck to you all. All we have time for is just closing remarks, and the time is 1.5 minutes for each candidate, and I'll start with Ross.
So yeah, just want to mention that you've got a minute and a minute, let's say a minute, just over a minute to final closing, close off, and then we can finish off the talks. Who is first, Hashim? Ross. Here we go, Ross.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, I'd like people to vote for me, the Labour candidate, on the 6th of May, because the current Labour administration of the police force has created 289 more police officers. So you can trust us to do that. You can trust me in what I say when I say I want to double that number in the 3 years of my term of office. I also want to invest in crime prevention measures, in youth work, in tackling domestic violence, and in protecting the victims of crime. And I pledge to increase the amount of money that goes into that. I've already said about £1 million into youth work. That is my commitment to the people listening here today. I also want to ensure that we have a diverse police force. And so when we recruit those new police officers, they will reflect the communities that they are policing. So please vote Labour on May the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
My commitment as a Liberal Democrat is to restore neighbourhood and community policing, because without neighbourhood and community policing, little else is possible. We need to actually decentralise the police, and we need to make sure it's properly funded. Over the last decade, we've had a Labour Police Commissioner and a Conservative Police Commissioner, but we have 300 fewer police officers in our streets than we had a decade ago. We're also in a situation where youth services have been horrendously cut by the Labour City Council. We need to make sure that youth services are restored so we can genuinely engage with communities and engage with issues of crime prevention and turn people back onto the right path who have strayed. It's vitally important that you vote in this election. These elections often have very low turnouts, but we need to have a police commissioner who listens, is committed to neighbourhood and community policing, and puts his money where his mouth is. And I will be that police commissioner.
Thank you, James. Rupert, finally.
Thank you. Yes, I want the police to be proactive in the fight against crime. I want them to get on the front foot. That means that they've got to be working with all of our communities. They've got to understand our communities. They've got to work with the public in order to defeat crime, because I want it to be the criminals that are frightened, not ordinary members of the public. We've covered a lot of ground today, but there is lots more that needs to be said. So again, I will urge everyone to go and look at my website, rupertmatthews.org.uk. The manifesto is there. There are lots of articles for you to read. But possibly the most important thing is we live in a democracy. The Police and Crime Commissioner is the way in which the people exercise democratic control over the police. So please, however you intend to vote on Thursday, the 6th of May, please do go and vote. Obviously, I hope that you will vote for me, the Conservative candidate, Rupert Matthews. But whatever you do, go and vote on Thursday, the 6th of May, and please vote Conservative.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today. We've got literally less than 2.5 minutes. Just want to say, wishing all of you a really, really good luck for your yeah, Hashim, what would you like to say? And
thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you for taking the time to talk to the community. And the community now, I think, is a better position to understand
your manifestos
and what you stand for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they will be doing their choices soon. Thank you for being with us.
Okay. And I just want to put this there, saying that once a candidate has been selected, I hope we don't have to contact you. I want the candidate to contact EAVA FM. You know me, Vijay or Hashim, and we can feature you on our show for another 2 hours about the successful and what you plan to do.
Look forward to that. Look forward to it.
I am going to be really hard on that. We are not going to contact you. I wish your office to contact us for this cause.
Thank you ever so much, it's been really pleasure having you, and you've been very
thank you.
Good gentleman, and that is
fantastic.
Democratic is for. I just urge the communities to exercise their democratic rights. They cannot say later on, I didn't vote for this guy or that guy.
Hashim.
It is impossible to blame others later. I urge everyone to go and vote and use your democratic rights. Please.
May the 6th is going down. It's going down on May the 6th.
And take your own pen. Because of COVID, they are advising people to take their own pen for the ballot boxes. And also keep your distance. Be safe. And thank you for being with us. I'll wait for you next Wednesday. I hope that you enjoyed our company as much as we enjoyed your company. And please keep coming. Your feedback is more. Duale.
Okay. Yes, we've got less than 30 seconds left to finish off before we go back into the commercials. Hashim, it's been fantastic having all three candidates here. Remember, you can carry on watching these. They will be live on our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel. So even if anybody wants to share them, please share them with community members. All the videos will be staying up there. I think the YouTube takes a little bit longer to process. Facebook will be there shortly. Okay, EAVA FM 102.5. This is your host, Hashim and Vijay.